Amina and Kofi's wedding was the talk of the small town of Adam. The people said it was the most beautiful celebration they had seen in years. The drums beat loudly, the women danced with joy, and the smell of jollof rice and grilled meat filled the air. Everyone smiled as the young couple walked hand in hand through the crowd. They looked happy and full of love. Kofi could not stop looking at his new wife, and Amina blushed every time their eyes met. Their love was simple and honest, the kind of love that made people believe in good things. But not everyone shared that joy. Standing at the edge of the crowd was Amina, Kofi's older sister. She smiled when others looked at her, but inside her heart was heavy. She had cared for Kofi since they were young. When their parents died, she had taken the role of both mother and sister. She had worked hard to make sure Kofi had food, clothes, and an education. So when he brought Amina home, Amina felt something shift inside her. She told herself she was happy for him, but deep down, she feared losing him. During the wedding, Amina watched as people surrounded Amina, praising her beauty and grace. The women called her the lucky wife, and the men joked that Kofi had chosen well. Amina felt invisible. It hurt her pride, though she didn't understand why. When she saw Kofi help Amina carry her gown or whisper something that made her laugh, jealousy crept into her heart like smoke through a small crack. That night, after the guests had left and the music had stopped, Amina sat alone outside her room. The moon shone over the quiet compound. She could hear Kofi and Amina talking softly in their new house. Their laughter drifted through the night air, gentle and sweet. Amina's eyes filled with tears. She remembered the days when Kofi would come home from school and tell her every story about his day. Now those stories would belong to someone else. She felt forgotten. Amina, on the other hand, was excited but nervous about her new life. She knew marriage was not just about love but also about patience and understanding. She had grown up in a peaceful home, where her parents taught her to respect family bonds. So when she noticed Amina's quietness, she tried to draw her closer. Every morning, Amina would greet her sister-in-law with a smile and offer to cook breakfast together. Sometimes Amina joined her, other times she made excuses and left early. Amina didn't give up. She wanted peace in her new home. Kofi loved how Amina tried to fit into his family. He often told his friends that he had found a woman with both beauty and wisdom. He believed his sister and his wife would soon become close. But he did not see the small looks Amina gave when Amina spoke, nor the way her smile faded when Kofi praised his wife. Weeks passed, and the couple settled into married life. They worked together at Kofi's small shop, selling household goods. Amina was good with customers, and soon business improved. Kofi was proud of her ideas, and he told everyone that his wife had a gift for trade. The more he admired her, the more Amina's jealousy grew. She felt that Amina was taking her place not only in Kofi's heart but in his life. At night, Amina sometimes dreamt of the old days when Kofi would bring her small gifts from the market. She missed his laughter, his attention, the way he would ask her for advice. Now, whenever she tried to talk to him, he was busy with Amina. When she asked him for help with small things, he would say, "Amina and I will do it later." Those words stung her more than she could admit. One Sunday after church, Amina invited Amina to join her in the kitchen. "Sister, let's cook together," she said kindly. "I want to learn your way of making stew." Amina forced a smile and agreed. But as they worked, she found herself correcting Amina sharply. "No, not like that. You're wasting the tomatoes," she snapped. Amina stayed calm and apologized. When the food was finally ready, everyone praised it. Kofi told Amina, "Your stew always tastes the best." But instead of feeling proud, Amina felt annoyed when he added, "Amina is learning quickly from you." Later that evening, when Amina tried to thank her, Amina's smile was cold. "You should focus on your home," she said. "Cooking is not the only thing that makes a good wife." Amina didn't understand what she meant, but she felt a sadness in her heart. She knew Amina didn't dislike her, not openly, but something was wrong. Kofi remained unaware of the quiet tension growing between the two women. He believed everything was fine. When Amina mentioned that Amina seemed distant, he simply said, "That's how my sister is. She will come around." He didn't see the pain behind his wife's soft eyes or the bitterness hidden in his sister's heart. As the months passed, the small cracks in their relationship widened. Abina's jealousy began to shape her thoughts. She started imagining things, that Amina was trying to turn Kofi against her, that she was being replaced in every way. These thoughts kept her awake at night. She prayed for peace, but her heart refused to listen. She began to think that if Amina were not around, Kofi would once again be the brother she used to know. Yet even in her growing envy, Abina could not fully hate Amina. There were moments when she saw her genuine kindness, how she cared for Kofi, how she helped in the community, how she always spoke gently even when others were rude. Deep inside, Abina felt ashamed of her feelings, but pride stopped her from admitting it. Meanwhile, Amina continued to show respect and love. She brought small gifts for Abina and included her in family matters. When people in the village spoke about her happy marriage, she always mentioned her sister-in-law's help. But nothing she did seemed enough to break the wall between them. The story of Amina and Kofi's happy beginning slowly started to change. The same smiles that once brightened their mornings now appeared less often. Abina's quiet anger grew stronger each day, and though no one could see it clearly, a storm was forming in their peaceful home. The town still saw them as the perfect couple, but inside their walls, shadows of doubt began to creep in. Amina prayed that time would bring peace between her and Abina, unaware that her gentle sister-in-law was fighting a silent battle in her own heart, one that would soon test the strength of everyone's love. Abina's jealousy did not show at first. On the outside, she smiled and acted like everything was fine. She still greeted Amina every morning, still joined the family for dinner, and still called her my sister. But deep inside, her thoughts had started to turn dark. Each time she saw Kofi and Amina talking and laughing together, something inside her tightened. She began to believe that Amina had taken more than her brother's love, she had taken her place in his world. It began with small whispers, soft words said at the right time. One evening, while Kofi sat outside after work, Abina joined him with a calm face. She asked simple questions at first, about business, about the home, and then said, "Brother, I don't want to interfere, but people are talking." Kofi looked at her, surprised. "Talking about what?" he asked. Abina lowered her voice. "They say Amina spends too much money at the market. I told them it can't be true, but—" She let her words hang in the air. Kofi frowned slightly. He trusted Amina, but the seed had been planted. Later that week, when Amina bought a few extra things for the house, he remembered what Abina had said. He didn't speak, but his smile was smaller that night. Amina noticed, but she thought he was simply tired. Abina saw the small change in Kofi and felt a strange satisfaction. Her plan seemed to be working. She began adding more whispers, one after another. She told Kofi that Amina had complained about his mother's old cooking pots, that she found his family too simple. She even claimed that Amina once said she wished Kofi would move them away from the village. Kofi didn't believe everything at first. He knew his wife was gentle and respectful. But when Abina spoke, she did it with care. She looked worried, like someone protecting her brother. She never accused Amina directly, she only shared what she had heard. Her voice was always soft, her face innocent. Slowly, her words began to feel true in Kofi's heart. One morning, Amina was washing clothes when Kofi asked, "Did you say something bad about my family?" She looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" she asked. Kofi shook his head. "Never mind. I just heard something strange." Amina frowned. "From who?" But Kofi didn't answer. He didn't want to accuse his sister. He just said, "Be careful with your words." Amina felt hurt. She tried to understand what was happening. She thought maybe someone had misunderstood her. She prayed for peace, but inside, she began to feel lonely. The love that once flowed so easily between her and Kofi started to dry up like a river in the dry season. Abina noticed the growing distance between them. When she saw Kofi quiet at dinner, she smiled secretly. But she hid her smile when Amina looked at her. "Brother," she said softly, "marriage is not easy. You must be patient with your wife." Kofi nodded, thinking his sister was giving him advice, not realizing she was the one creating the storm. Soon, small arguments began to appear in the house. They were not big fights, just tiny misunderstandings, about money, about visitors, about work. When Kofi forgot to tell Amina something, she would ask why he didn't speak to her. When Amina spent time visiting her mother, Kofi would question why she stayed so long. These little moments, once harmless, now felt heavy. The home that used to be full of laughter became quiet. Amina often sat alone in the evenings, weaving her baskets. She would look at Kofi and remember how he used to laugh with her. Now his eyes seemed distant. She tried to bring joy back. She cooked his favorite meals, she waited for him at the shop, she even bought him a new shirt for his birthday. He thanked her, but his warmth was gone. Amina continued to add to the fire. When she saw Amina hanging clothes outside, she would approach her with a smile that hid her sharp words. "You're doing so much," she would say, "but men are never satisfied, are they? Especially when their wives don't listen." Amina would blink in confusion. "I always listen," she said. Amina shrugged. "I'm only saying what people say." "I know you try." Then she would walk away, leaving Amina troubled. The more Amina tried to understand, the worse things got. Kofi began to believe that his wife no longer respected him. He started staying longer at his shop, coming home late, speaking less. Amina's heart grew heavy. At night, she prayed silently beside him, asking God to restore the peace they once had. Amina, meanwhile, played her part well. To outsiders, she appeared caring. When neighbors asked how Amina was doing, she would sigh and say, "Marriage has changed her. She doesn't greet me the way she used to." People began to whisper. Soon, stories spread through the town. By the time they reached Kofi's ears, they had grown bigger, that Amina was proud, that she was wasteful, that she no longer respected her husband's family. Kofi didn't know what to believe anymore. He loved Amina, but the whispers were loud. Every kind act from her began to look suspicious. If she gave a gift to someone, he thought she was showing off. If she stayed quiet, he thought she was hiding something. He didn't realize how much his sister's words had changed his view. One rainy evening, Kofi and Amina had their first real fight. It started over something small, missing money from the shop. Kofi accused her of taking it without telling him. Amina was shocked. "I would never do that," she said, tears in her eyes. "Why would you think I'd steal from my own home?" Kofi didn't answer. He just turned away. Amina watched from the doorway, pretending to be sad, though inside she felt powerful. That night, Amina couldn't sleep. She sat on the floor, looking at her hands. She thought of her wedding day, the laughter, the dancing, the promise of love. She wondered how everything had changed so quickly. She didn't know that the whispers that destroyed her peace were born from jealousy, not truth. In the days that followed, the silence in the house grew thicker. Kofi spoke little, Amina spoke much, and Amina's heart broke quietly. The woman who had once filled the home with light now walked softly, afraid of every word. The husband who had once adored her now looked at her with doubt. And the sister who had once loved her brother now smiled behind his back, thinking she had won. But what Amina didn't know was that storms never last forever. Though her whispers were strong enough to bend the bond between Kofi and Amina, they would not break it completely. The truth, like the sun after rain, had a way of returning, and when it did, it would shine brighter than any lie. The sun was hot that morning when Kofi and Amina's argument began. It started with something small, as it often did these days. Kofi had misplaced some money from his shop and, without thinking, accused Amina of being careless. She tried to explain that she had not touched it, but he refused to listen. His anger had been growing for weeks, fed by the quiet lies that Amina whispered into his ear. Amina stood by the door, tears filling her eyes as Kofi's voice rose. "You never listen," he shouted. "You don't respect my family, and you don't respect me." She shook her head, her voice trembling. "Kofi, that is not true. I have always loved and respected you. Please, you are believing things that are not real." But Kofi was no longer the same man she had married. The warmth that once filled his eyes was gone. Amina stood near the kitchen, pretending to be busy with her chores, but she was listening to every word. Her heart beat faster each time Kofi raised his voice. She had wanted this moment, the moment when Amina would finally leave. She had told herself that once Amina was gone, things would go back to how they used to be. Kofi would once again be her little brother who shared everything with her. After the fight, Kofi told Amina to go to her mother's house for a while. He said he needed time to think. His words were calm, but his tone was cold. Amina looked at him for a long moment. She wanted to speak, to remind him of their love, of all they had shared. But she saw that his mind was made up. With a quiet sigh, she went to their bedroom, packed a small bag, and left. As she walked down the dusty road, the wind carried the sound of children laughing in the distance. She did not look back. Her heart felt heavy, but she kept her head high. She would not cry where people could see her. She told herself that God saw her heart and that truth would one day come to light. When she reached her mother's village, her mother, Adwoa, opened the door and saw her daughter's tired eyes. Without a word, she pulled her into a hug. "My child," she said softly, "I knew something was wrong. You have been too quiet." Amina finally allowed herself to cry. She told her mother everything, the lies, the distance, the anger. Her mother listened and then said, "Do not let bitterness live in your heart. Sometimes, life removes us from storms so we can find peace." Days turned into weeks. At first, Amina struggled to sleep. The memories of her home, her laughter with Kofi, and the love they once shared haunted her. But slowly, she began to heal. Her mother encouraged her to work with her hands, to keep herself busy. So, Amina began weaving baskets, something she had learned as a child. Her hands moved with patience and care, the same way her heart began to mend. At first, she sold only a few baskets in a small market, but people quickly noticed the beauty of her work. Her designs were simple yet elegant. Soon, traders from nearby villages came to buy them. She earned small but honest money, and her name began to spread. Each morning, as she worked, she felt peace returning to her. The pain in her chest didn't disappear, but it softened with every basket she made. Back in town, Kofi's house grew quiet. At first, he thought he would enjoy the silence, but he soon realized it was empty. The house felt cold without Amina's laughter, without her songs while she cooked, without her gentle words before bed. Amina tried to make things normal again. She cooked his meals and asked about his day, but Kofi felt no comfort. He missed the warmth that Amina had brought into his life, though he would not admit it. Sometimes, late at night, Kofi would think about her face, the way she smiled when he was tired, the way she prayed softly before sleep. He began to wonder if he had made a mistake. But pride kept him from going after her. He told himself he had done the right thing. Amina noticed his sadness. She tried to cheer him up, but he no longer looked at her the same way. Though she had gotten what she wanted, Amina gone, the house did not feel like home anymore. There was no laughter, no joy, only silence. Sometimes, she would sit alone and ask herself why she still felt empty. Meanwhile, Amina's life began to bloom again. The villagers loved her baskets, and soon, she started teaching young girls how to weave. Her small business grew into something beautiful. She found comfort in helping others and in creating something from her pain. People admired her strength. They often said, "Amina has a heart made of gold." Even after what she went through, she still smiles. One afternoon, while she sat at her stall in the market, she heard two women talking nearby. They were from Kofi's town. "Have you heard?" one said. "Kofi's shop is not doing well anymore. He seems troubled." Amina looked up for a moment, her hands pausing. Then she lowered her eyes and continued weaving. She did not wish him harm. She whispered a small prayer for him and went on with her work. At night, as she sat by the fire, her mother told her, "You see, my child, sometimes life gives us breaks to build us stronger. The same hands that once wiped tears are now creating beauty. That is strength." Amina smiled softly. She was learning that healing was not forgetting, but finding peace despite the hurt. Months passed, and her baskets began to sell in larger markets. She even received an offer to supply them to a trader in the city. It was something she had never dreamed of. She knew that her life was changing, that her pain had given birth to something good. But deep in her heart, she still thought of Kofi. She remembered the man he had been before the lies and anger. Sometimes she wondered if he ever thought of her. Still, she refused to let sadness rule her life. She chose gratitude instead, for her work, her mother, and the peace she had found. Back in town, Kofi began to hear stories too. People told him how well Amina was doing, how she had become strong and respected. Each story made him feel smaller inside. He realized that while he had lost his peace, she had found hers. The more he thought about it, the more he understood that he had been blind. Abina noticed his silence. She feared that the truth was starting to reach him, but she didn't know how to stop it. She had built her lies carefully, but truth has a way of slipping through cracks. One night, as Kofi sat alone, he finally admitted to himself that sending Amina away had been the biggest mistake of his life. He thought of going to her, but shame held him back. He didn't know how to face her after all the things he had said. And far away, under the same moon, Amina sat outside her mother's house, weaving another basket. The night breeze was gentle, and she felt calm. She looked up at the stars and smiled faintly. Her heart, once broken, was slowly becoming whole again. She didn't know what the future would bring, but she had learned something powerful. Even after the greatest storm, a woman's spirit can rise again. Months passed, and the once cheerful home of Kofi grew darker with each day. His business, which had once been busy and full of customers, began to slow down. At first, he thought it was just a bad season. The rains had delayed, people were spending less, and he told himself things would get better. But as time went on, it became clear that something was wrong. His shelves grew empty, his debts piled up, and even his suppliers stopped giving him goods on credit. The customers who once trusted him began to go elsewhere. Some said quietly that Kofi had changed, that he was no longer kind as he used to be. Others said his home no longer had peace, and that such things affected a man's blessings. Kofi heard the whispers but ignored them. Still, he could not ignore the sadness in his heart. Every morning, he woke up feeling heavy. The house felt too quiet, and the meals had no taste. Abina noticed the change but tried to hide her fear. She could see that her brother was troubled, yet she didn't know how to comfort him without showing guilt. Her lies had done their work, Amina was gone, and she had what she thought she wanted. But instead of peace, she felt emptiness. The laughter that used to echo in the house had disappeared, and no matter how much she tried, she could not fill that space. One evening, Kofi came home early. His shop had been quiet all day. He sat on the wooden bench outside the house, staring at the ground. "I don't understand," he said softly. "Everything I worked for is slipping away." Abina stood nearby, her heart pounding. She wanted to tell him the truth, to confess everything, but fear held her back. So she said nothing. The truth, however, has its own way of coming out. In the market, people talk, and sometimes talk travels faster than the wind. One afternoon, a woman named Efua, who often visited Kofi's shop, overheard Abina speaking to another trader. She was bragging softly, saying that she had saved her brother from a proud wife who wanted to control him. Efua was shocked. She knew Amina well, and she had never seen pride in her. That evening, she visited Kofi at his shop. "Kofi," she said gently, "I don't mean to bring trouble, but you need to hear something. Your sister has been saying things that are not right. She told people that Amina wanted to leave you and take your money. I have known Amina since childhood. She is not that kind of woman." Kofi frowned, confused. "What are you saying?" he asked. Efua told him everything she had heard, and her words hit him like cold water. He couldn't believe it at first. He wanted to think there was a mistake, but deep inside, his heart began to tremble. He remembered all the little things, how Abina had always been the one bringing him news, how she always spoke softly but left him doubting Amina afterward. He began to see the pattern. That night, he could not sleep. He walked up and down the small compound, his mind full of memories. He remembered the look on Amina's face the day she left, hurt but calm, sad but dignified. He remembered how she never shouted, how she never cursed. For the first time, he felt shame rise inside him like fire. The next morning, Kofi went to the market early. He began asking around, speaking to neighbors and traders who knew his wife. Slowly, the pieces of truth began to fall into place. One woman told him how Amina had cried quietly at her mother's house but never spoke a bad word about him. Another man said he had overheard Abina speaking poorly of Amina many times. The more he heard, the more his heart broke. By noon, Kofi returned home, his face pale with guilt. Abina was washing clothes outside when he arrived. "Sister," he said, his voice low but shaking, "I need to talk to you." She looked up and saw the pain in his eyes. "What is it, Kofi?" she asked. He stared at her for a long time before speaking. "Tell me the truth. Did you lie to me about Amina?" Amina froze. Her hands trembled. For a moment, she wanted to deny it, to keep her secret hidden. But when she saw her brother's eyes, full of sorrow and disappointment, her strength broke. Tears filled her eyes as she dropped the wet cloth. "I didn't mean for things to go so far," she whispered. I was jealous. I thought she took you away from me." Kofi closed his eyes and turned away. He felt anger, sadness, and regret all at once. "You destroyed my marriage," he said quietly. "You took away my peace. You made me doubt the woman who loved me." Amina began to cry. "I only wanted things to be like before," she said. But her words sounded empty. Nothing she said could undo the damage. News of Amina's confession spread through the neighborhood. The same neighbors who once believed her lies now turned against her. They whispered behind her back, calling her heartless. Some even refused to greet her. She began to avoid the market, staying indoors most days. The shame was too heavy to carry. Kofi, meanwhile, felt lost. He tried to continue with his business, but his heart wasn't in it anymore. Each time he looked at the shop, he remembered Amina standing beside him, smiling as she helped customers. Without her, everything felt lifeless. Even the small profits he made could not bring him joy. One afternoon, as he walked past the market, he saw something that made him stop. There, under a big tree, sat Amina. She was selling her baskets, her hands moving gracefully as she spoke with buyers. She looked peaceful, her face calm and strong. For a moment, Kofi just stood there, unable to move. He wanted to go to her, to fall to his knees and beg for forgiveness. But shame held him still. He turned and walked away slowly, his heart breaking with every step. That night, Kofi sat in his empty house. The silence around him was unbearable. He realized that he had lost everything, not only his wife but also his own peace and reputation. The neighbors no longer respected him the same way. They said quietly, "A man who does not trust his good wife cannot prosper." Amina stayed in her room most days, eaten by guilt. She watched her brother suffer and knew that her actions had caused it all. Sometimes she tried to speak to him, but he avoided her. The bond they once shared was broken. Weeks later, Kofi finally gathered the courage to write a letter. He didn't know if Amina would ever forgive him, but he had to try. In the letter, he wrote simply, "Amina, I have learned the truth. I wronged you deeply. I believed lies and let them destroy our love. I do not ask you to return, only to forgive me so I may live with a clean heart again." When Amina received the letter, she read it slowly. She felt a tear roll down her cheek, but it was not out of anger. She had already forgiven him in her heart long ago. Still, she knew that some wounds could not heal quickly. As for Amina, her punishment was not from anyone else, it came from within. Every time she saw her brother's quiet eyes, every time she heard Amina's name in the market, she felt the weight of her own actions. She had ruined the very thing she loved most, her family's peace. And so, the truth unfolded, bringing pain but also clarity. The lies that once seemed small had grown into storms that destroyed hearts. Kofi finally understood that trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. And Amina learned that jealousy, once planted, grows like a weed, until it chokes everything good around it. The morning was bright and peaceful when Kofi finally decided to face Amina. Months had passed since the truth came out, and his heart had carried the heavy weight of regret every single day. His business was gone, his home felt cold, and even the neighbors who once admired him now looked at him with pity. Amina barely spoke anymore, and the house had fallen silent, as if it too was ashamed of what had happened. Kofi had thought about this moment many times, the moment he would stand before Amina and ask for forgiveness. But each time, fear stopped him. He did not know what words could ever fix what he had broken. He had destroyed the one person who truly loved him, the one who never raised her voice even when he shouted. Yet that morning, as the sun rose over the quiet town, he knew it was time. He walked to the market, holding his hat in his hands. The road felt longer than he remembered, each step filled with memories of what he had lost. The laughter that once filled his days now echoed only in his mind. When he reached the market square, he saw her. Amina sat beneath a large tree, surrounded by her baskets. She looked calm, dressed in a simple blue cloth, her hands busy weaving another basket. Children laughed around her, helping her arrange the goods, and traders greeted her with smiles. She looked peaceful, more peaceful than she had ever been. Kofi stood there for a long moment, unable to move. He had imagined her sad and broken, but instead, she was glowing with quiet strength. Her stall was busy, her customers happy, and her name respected. That sight pierced his heart more than any angry word ever could. He realized that her silence and strength were the greatest revenge, not through hate, but through grace. He finally gathered his courage and walked toward her. The sound of his footsteps made her look up. For a moment, their eyes met. Amina froze slightly, her hands pausing on the half-finished basket. Then she looked away and continued her work. Her calmness made Kofi's heart tremble. "Amina," he said softly, his voice low and uncertain. "Please, may I speak with you?" The women nearby looked at each other, sensing the tension. Amina nodded slowly, still keeping her eyes on her work. "You can speak," she said quietly. Kofi took off his hat and held it close to his chest. His voice broke as he spoke. "I came to ask for forgiveness. I wronged you deeply. I believed lies, I hurt you, and I sent you away when you did nothing wrong. I was blind, and I destroyed the peace we built together. I have no excuse. I only have regret." The market fell silent for a moment. Even the wind seemed to slow down. Amina's hands stopped moving. She looked at him, her eyes calm but unreadable. There was no anger there, only quiet understanding, and a kind of strength that came from deep within. "Kofi," she said slowly, "you did what you thought was right at the time. But truth always finds its way out. What matters now is that you have learned." Her words were soft, but they struck him like thunder. He lowered his head, ashamed. "I do not ask you to come back," he said. "I only ask that you forgive me, so I may find peace again." Amina sighed gently. "I forgave you long ago," she said. "Not for you, but for myself. Holding pain in my heart would only have made me bitter. I chose peace instead." Her words made Kofi's eyes fill with tears. "You are a better person than I deserve," he whispered. "I see now that your strength was greater than my pride." She gave a faint smile. "Pride destroys faster than any fire," she said. "You lost much, but maybe it will teach you to cherish what truly matters." Kofi nodded, unable to speak. He felt a deep sadness, not because she was angry, but because she was not. Her calmness made him see just how far he had fallen. Amina stood up and wiped her hands on her cloth. "Kofi," she said softly, "I wish you peace. But I will not return. My path has changed. I am building something new now, and I must walk forward, not backward." Her words were gentle, but firm. Kofi looked at her, his voice trembling. "I understand," he said. "You have every right. I only hope one day you will remember me with kindness." "I already do," she said simply. "The past cannot be erased, but it can be forgiven. That is enough." Kofi looked at her baskets, each one woven with care, each one beautiful and strong. He realized that her life had become a reflection of her spirit, unbroken, steady, and full of purpose. He wanted to say more, but there were no words left. He bowed his head slightly and turned to leave. As he walked away, he felt lighter and heavier at the same time, lighter because she had forgiven him, heavier because he knew he had lost her forever. After Kofi left, Amina sat quietly for a while. Her mother, who had been nearby, came to sit beside her. "You have done well, my child," she said. "You faced pain with grace." Amina nodded. "It hurt to see him again," she admitted. "But I feel no anger now. I have peace." Her mother smiled. "That peace is your victory. Some people fight with words, others fight with silence. But the strongest fight with dignity." As the sun began to set, Amina packed her baskets and prepared to go home. The sky turned golden, and the market slowly emptied. She looked around her, at the people greeting her warmly, at the children helping her carry her things, and she felt grateful. Her life had not gone as she planned, but it had grown in a different, stronger way. Far away, Kofi walked home alone. He passed by the river where he and Amina used to sit in their early days of marriage. The water moved gently, and he remembered her laughter echoing across the water. He knelt by the riverbank and whispered, "I am sorry." The wind carried his words away, but deep inside, he felt that Amina's forgiveness had already reached him. Amina, meanwhile, watched her brother from the doorway as he returned that night. She could see that something in him had changed. He no longer looked angry or proud, only quiet and tired. She wanted to speak, to say she was sorry again, but he simply nodded and went inside. From that day, Kofi stopped talking about the past. He spent his time working on small repairs for people, living simply, and trying to rebuild his honor through good deeds. Amina's success grew even more. Her baskets began to sell in towns far away. Traders came from the city to buy from her, and she used her earnings to help young girls learn skills and start small businesses. People respected her not only for her talent but also for her kindness. She became known as the woman who turned pain into purpose. Sometimes, when she sat alone under the stars, she thought of Kofi and Amina. There was no anger in her heart, only a soft sadness for what could have been. She prayed that they would also find peace, the same way she had. In the end, her greatest revenge was not in words or actions but in her calm success. Her peace was louder than their lies. Her dignity lasted longer than their mistakes. She had been broken once, but she rose higher than before, proving that grace is the strongest form of revenge. And so, while Kofi lived with his regret and Amina with her shame, Amina lived with peace in her heart. Her smile returned, her spirit stayed bright, and her name became a story that mothers told their daughters, a story about patience, forgiveness, and strength.